Have you ever thought about, like, how an ancient language could actually hold the key to the future of computing?
It sounds a little crazy, right?
Yeah, it sounds like something out of science fiction. But that's kind of what we're looking at today, the connection between Sanskrit and technology.
It is pretty wild when you think about how these two things, ancient language and modern tech, they seem so different.
Totally. But, we've got this whole stack of research here, articles and studies all talking about how Sanskrit's structure, and especially Panini's Arshtayayi, could actually change how we design programming languages. And maybe even AI, too.
What's really remarkable about Sanskrit is just how precise it is. Modern languages like English, we've got tons of ambiguity, but Sanskrit was designed to have just one clear meaning. Every sentence, every word.
So like a programmer's dream.
Pretty much. Code with zero room for misinterpretations. Think about it. Fewer bugs, faster processing, that's the holy grail.
Yeah, exactly. Makes things way more reliable.
And all of that comes from Sanskrit's crazy grammar. It's incredibly sophisticated, like with these case endings that tell you exactly what each word is doing in a sentence. And that just wipes out any ambiguity. Like, compare that to English.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
Think about this sentence. I saw her duck.
Okay.
It could mean you saw a duck that belonged to her. Or it could mean you saw her, like, ducking to avoid something.
Oh, yeah, tricky.
Right. In Sanskrit, you'd never have that problem. The way the words are put together makes the meaning crystal clear.
Sanskrit was, like, way ahead of its time, thinking about error-free communication long before computers even existed.
You got it. And that kind of focus on being clear, being precise, that's gold in the world of programming.
Absolutely. And our research also talks about how universal Sanskrit is. Not just the grammar, but how it gets meaning across.
Right. The grammar is layered. It's powerful. You can express super complex ideas in a very specific way. It actually reminds me of how those data formats work, like JSON or XML. They're designed to share info between different systems. Doesn't matter what language they're using.
So it's like Sanskrit has this built-in system for making sure information can be shared smoothly between platforms, maybe even cultures.
Exactly. And think about the Devanagari script. Every character maps to a specific sound. No matter what language you speak, you pronounce it the same way.
Wow. So this ancient language might have answers to problems we're struggling with in computing today. One thing that really stuck with me was this idea of Sanskrit as like a universal intermediate language for programming.
Yeah, a lot of researchers are talking about that. Imagine if you had one language that could bridge the gap between all the different programming languages we use now.
So they could all talk to each other.
Yeah, seamlessly. It'd be a huge leap for efficiency and interoperability in the software world.
That would be incredible. No more compatibility issues, no more translating code between systems, like a universal translator for code.
And you know what's crazy? Sanskrit's grammatical rules haven't really changed for thousands of years.
It's timeless.
Exactly. We could have this level of stability that we just don't have now. Everything's changing so fast with software. Always updates, new versions.
It's exhausting. Sanskrit could be the solution to our software stability problems.
Speaking of structure, something that stood out to me was how Sanskrit syntax could change the game. The way code is written.
Oh, absolutely. It uses these short, rule-based statements called sutras. They're elegant, efficient. They pack a lot of complex grammar into a tiny space.
That sounds like a great model for writing really clean, efficient code. Can you give me an example of how these sutras would work in programming?
Sure. Think about a function, right? Like a reusable piece of code. In a Sanskrit-inspired language, you might use the keyword kriya, which means action.
So instead of saying, like, function calculates sum, you'd say kriya calculates sum. That feels way more intuitive. And it's not just about how it looks. That clarity makes the code easier to understand and to debug.
It's like the code reads like a proper sentence instead of just a jumble of symbols. But what about more complicated stuff, like conditional statements or loops? How would those work in a Sanskrit-inspired language?
Well, for conditional statements like those if-then-else things, we could use niyam. It means rule or condition. So instead of if condition then action, you'd have niyam condition parhi, action.
So we're basically creating a programming language that's built on the logic and the expressive power of Sanskrit.
That's the idea. And maybe by doing that, we'll discover totally new ways to write code. Not just more efficient code, but code that's easier to understand, more elegant.
It's like blending ancient wisdom with cutting-edge tech.
And who knows what could come from that? We're just starting to explore the possibilities. So welcome back. I think it's time to really jump into the area where Sanskrit could completely change the game. I'm talking about artificial intelligence.
Yeah, this is where it gets really exciting for me. The idea of using Sanskrit's philosophical ideas in AI. Our research talks about Nyaya, that ancient Indian system of logic. Like, maybe it could be a blueprint for building smarter machines.
Nyaya is all about a systematic approach to knowledge, how we learn things, how we reason. It actually lays out 4 ways to gain knowledge: direct perception, inference, comparison, and what they call testimony. It's amazing how well these ideas from centuries ago line up with how we design AI today.
It's kind of mind-blowing. Can you break it down for me? Like, how would you actually use those principles in AI development?
Okay, imagine an AI that's designed to, say, diagnose diseases.
Okay.
Using Naya, the AI could take in the patient's symptoms. That'd be direct perception. Then it could infer possible diagnoses based on those symptoms.
I'm following you.
And then it could compare this patient's case to similar cases in a database and even consult, like, expert medical texts for confirmation.
So like teaching the AI to think like a human doctor, using logic and pulling info from all these different sources.
You got it. Nyaya gives us a structure for building AI that can reason logically, make conclusions based on evidence, and even double-check its own thinking.
That makes the AI not just accurate, but also more trustworthy.
Exactly. Especially when AI is making decisions that affect people's lives, we need to understand how those decisions are happening.
Transparency is key.
100%. And that's where Sanskrit's emphasis on clarity becomes so important. Integrating Nyaya into AI could give us systems that can explain their thought process so we can understand how they're reaching their conclusions.
That makes a lot of sense. Our sources also mention Mimamsa, another ancient school of thought, but this one's more about natural language processing.
Yeah, Mimamsa focuses on how we interpret texts, understanding meaning not just from individual words, but from the context, the relationships between words.
It's like the precursor to modern NLP.
It is. We're teaching machines to do the same thing now, right? To understand the nuances of language, not just single words.
So we can move beyond just basic keyword recognition, get AI to actually understand what we mean.
Exactly. Imagine a voice assistant that not only understands your commands, but also gets your intent, your emotional state, even the context of what you're asking. That's the kind of deeper interaction that Mimamsa could help us achieve.
It's amazing how these ancient systems, developed way before computers, are so relevant to AI development today.
It really shows you the power of human observation and logic. The challenges we're facing now in AI, understanding language, reasoning, making ethical choices, they're fundamentally human problems. And Sanskrit's philosophies offer a rich history of dealing with those problems.
It's about taking that ancient wisdom and using it in our digital world.
Right. And beyond philosophy, let's think about how Sanskrit's language features themselves could be used in building programming languages.
This is where it gets really practical. How do these abstract ideas become tools we can use to build software? The research talks about using Sanskrit grammar to define data types and structures in programming.
It's a natural fit. Every programming language has to have ways to represent data, and Sanskrit offers this intuitive model for doing that. Like, think about the word anka.
Yeah.
It means number. So instead of using keywords like int or float to declare a number, you could use anka.
That makes sense. It's more descriptive.
It is, and it's not just simple types. Sanskrit has this system called samasa, where you combine words to create compound words.
Okay, yeah.
That's perfect for creating hierarchical data structures, just like those Russian nesting dolls.
Each one holds a smaller one inside.
Exactly. We could use samasa to build complex structures that mirror how things are organized in the real world. Like, imagine a samasa called house. It could have fields for number of rooms, color, address, all in one structure.
So you're not just representing the data, but the connections between the data points.
Yeah.
How they relate to each other.
Precisely. And this approach could lead to more intuitive ways of working with data in software.
What about the logic of the program? How would you handle things like those conditional statements or loops using Sanskrit principles?
Well, for conditionals, we already talked about using niyam for condition. And for loops, the things that repeat instructions, we could use a word like parivartana. It means repetition or cycle.
So instead of the typical for or while loops, you'd have parivartana loops.
Right. The goal is to build a programming language that mirrors the logical structure and expressive power of Sanskrit.
It's a really cool idea, but I can see where it might get tricky. Sanskrit's pretty flexible, right? Lots of nuance. How do you translate that into the strict rules of computer instructions?
That's a good point. Sanskrit grammar, while precise, allows for variations in word order and sentence structure. That's what makes it so expressive for humans, but it could be a challenge for machines.
So how do you bridge that gap? How do you teach a computer to understand those subtle shades of meaning in a language that was designed for humans?
That's where natural language processing, or NLP, comes in. We can use NLP to train machines to grasp the subtleties of Sanskrit grammar, to figure out the intended meaning, even when the structure isn't linear.
It sounds super complex, but also like it could lead to huge advancements in AI and NLP.
It's about pushing the limits, combining the wisdom of Sanskrit with the latest tools in computing.
Who knows what we might be able to achieve? It's an incredible journey. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Me too. Now let's dive into some real-world examples. We'll look at how these Sanskrit-inspired ideas are being used in fields like machine translation and even robotics.
Welcome back. I'm really excited to see how this is all playing out in the real world. Like, how are these Sanskrit ideas actually being used in technology today?
It's pretty amazing. We're not quite at a full-blown Sanskrit programming language yet, but we are seeing those principles being used in a lot of different fields, and it's leading to some really cool advancements.
Okay, let's start with something everyone uses voice assistants, like on our phones or smart speakers. Those are powered by natural language processing, NLP. So how could Sanskrit help make those experiences better?
Well, one of the biggest problems for NLP is ambiguity. Human language is messy. There are a lot of ways to interpret things. But as we've talked about, Sanskrit was built to be precise, to be clear. It uses things like case endings and a very strict grammar to get rid of that ambiguity.
So maybe instead of just trying to solve the problem with more computing power, we can actually learn from Sanskrit and build NLP systems that are inherently less likely to misunderstand things.
Exactly. Imagine a voice assistant that really gets what you mean, not just the words you're saying. It can handle more complex requests, figure out the right meaning even when there are multiple options, and it can even respond in a way that feels more natural, more human. Sanskrit's principles could be the key to making that happen.
Wow. That would be a game changer. So we've talked about voice assistants, but what about AI in general? Can Sanskrit actually make AI smarter?
I think it has huge potential. A lot of the big challenges in AI right now are things like reasoning, deduction, understanding context. And these are all areas where Sanskrit's philosophy and linguistic frameworks could be incredibly valuable.
We talked earlier about Nyaya, that ancient system of logic. Could those principles be used to make AI more intelligent, more reliable?
Think of it this way. Nyaya gives us a blueprint for building logical AI. It's a structured approach to how knowledge is acquired, how we draw conclusions. By incorporating those methods into AI systems, we could create machines that not only reason logically, but can actually explain their reasoning process to us.
So instead of these AI systems that are like a black box making decisions we don't understand, we could have AI that's transparent, accountable.
Exactly. That transparency would be crucial for things like medical diagnoses or legal analysis. Anytime AI is making decisions that affect people's lives, we need to be able to trust those decisions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know our research also mentioned some really cool, specific applications of these Sanskrit ideas. One that caught my eye was using Sanskrit as a kind of intermediary language for machine translation.
That's a really creative approach. Instead of trying to directly translate between two languages that are very different, they're using Sanskrit as a bridge. Because of its structured grammar and precise vocabulary, it's actually a really good way to connect languages that would be difficult to translate accurately otherwise.
So we're using this ancient language to solve one of the toughest problems in communication today. It's amazing to think about Sanskrit helping to break down language barriers and maybe even helping people understand each other better.
And it's not just translation. There are even researchers looking at using algorithms inspired by Sanskrit grammar to control robots.
Wait, robots that speak Sanskrit?
Well, not exactly, but the algorithms that guide their movements are based on the principles of Sanskrit grammar. That focus on conciseness and logical flow makes for really elegant, efficient algorithms, perfect for controlling complex movements.
So in a way, these robots are embodying the precision and clarity of Sanskrit in the way they move and interact with the world.
Exactly. It's a beautiful example of how ancient wisdom can inspire modern innovation. And honestly, these are just a few examples. As more people start to explore the potential of Sanskrit, I think we're going to see even more applications. In cybersecurity, data analysis, maybe even music composition, the possibilities are endless.
It's definitely an exciting time to be looking at this intersection of ancient language and technology. As we wrap up our deep dive today, what's the main thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
I think the most important takeaway is that innovation can come from anywhere. We often think about progress as this straight line, always moving forward. But sometimes the best solutions come from looking back, from revisiting ancient wisdom and finding new ways to apply it.
It's a good reminder to be curious, to keep an open mind, to never underestimate the power of human ingenuity, no matter where it comes from.
The future of computing isn't just about building faster machines or writing more efficient code. It's about expanding our understanding of what's possible. And that often means looking beyond what's familiar, pushing the boundaries of our thinking.
Who knows what other amazing things are hidden within ancient traditions like Sanskrit, just waiting to be discovered and used to solve the challenges of the 21st century.
That's the beauty of exploration. We never know what we might find. That's what makes it so exciting.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Sanskrit and computing. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
And we hope you'll keep exploring, keep asking questions, and always remember, the most groundbreaking solutions might just be hiding in the most unexpected places.